that. We're recording there. All right, you guys ready online? You ready here? All right. Today is Wednesday, April 19, 2023, and this is my little Bible study, and we are continuing with our line-by-line, verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus, all right? Last week we were working the Ark of the Covenant, I think is what we were on, all right? Father, we ask this reach people with open eyes and open ears in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, here we go. Last week, the Ark of the Covenant. We had a pretty interesting little study with the Ark of the Covenant then. We had brought up, hopefully I didn't, like I said last week, the intention was not to demystify God, but actually it should add a little bit more mystery to it. What does God want with a big capacitor that's actually the body of the Ark of the Covenant? All right? And you see a lot of things that go on along with it. It's related somehow. And to me, that just makes more mystery because it doesn't really need it to do things. So what's the point? All right. The thing that we really need to understand about the Ark of the Covenant has more to do with the lid and not with the capacitor nature of the actual Ark itself. And the lid, of course, was called the mercy seat. All right. And so they kind of talk about them as two separate things: the Ark of the Covenant and then the mercy seat. They work together. We talked a little bit about the cherubims. The description says that the arms are stretched across. You see some renderings that actually makes it like it makes it more like a chair with one wing forming the back of the chair and each wing on the arms forming the arms. I don't agree with that rendering. I believe it'd be more just like what would have been a typical throne of that era, which would have been more like what we would call a stool. Very innate one, right? But nonetheless, a stool just the same.
It just sounds like cherubims were.
Yes, right. The cherubim is right. That's what their job. But we're going to get into them tonight, probably tonight, because the Ark of the Covenant was the first thing that was associated with the temple that they said you'd build. Right? There's other things, and the table of showbread is one we're picking it up with tonight. We'll get into some of the rest of the things. Not all, but there are other things that are associated with inside the temple, and then outside in the court, like the brazen sea and the altar, and all these things. But we're going to talk about all of them. All right. But tonight, I don't know how far we're going to get. We're going to start with table of showbread and see what goes. And definitely we'll get with the menorah. All right. But nonetheless, so let's pick it up in chapter 25, verse 23. This is after the Ark of the Covenant. And thou shalt also make a table of shittim wood. All right. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height thereof. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, and make thereto a crown of gold around about. So just like the Ark of the Covenant, not the lid, but there was actually a crown that went across the top of it. This is the table. It's called the table of showbread, right? Verse 26, and thou shalt make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings in the 4 corners that are on the 4 feet thereof. So you have 4 rings just like you did on the Ark of the Covenant, and for the same reason, right? And over against the borders shall the rings be places of staves to bear the table. So they carried the staves just like they did the Ark of the Covenant. All right? And thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, that the table may be borne with them. And thou shalt make the dishes thereof, and the spoons thereof, and the covers thereof, and the bowls thereof, to cover withal. Of pure gold shalt thou make them. And thou set them upon the table of showbread before me always. Okay? Well, that's the table of showbread. Now, this is interesting because this is where the roots for what we call communion actually comes from. It comes from this table of showbread. All right? And as a part of it, if you use your Strongs and you look up showbread, here, let me do it. Copy, let's put that in there. It'll make more sense to you. You'll see me do it on the video. All right, for the word showbread, you get 18 verses found with 18 matches. All right, so it's mentioned a few times. The book of Exodus, the book of Numbers, which makes sense because the Numbers goes over it again about its construction. All right. 1 Samuel, 1 Kings, 1 Chronicles, a few times. 1 and 2 Chronicles, it's mentioned several times. But the one that I want to go to is Samuel 21. I want to pick it up. Let's see. Let's see let's just go up verse 1, I guess. And we'll go down, back down. Let's pick it up in verse 1, because it kind of sets it up. All right, in chapter 20 now, Jonathan and David, they've had a little thing going on where David was hiding, and depending on what Jonathan did was the answer to David's questions, whether he needed to flee or whether he needed to stay. All right, it was clear by what Jonathan did that David needed to leave. So he has to get out of there pretty quick, as fast as he can, all right, and that kind of catches it up with this. And David goes to this high priest, all right, at Nob. 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 1. Then David came to Nob to Amalek the priest. And Amalek was afraid at the meeting of David and said unto him, Why art thou alone and no man with thee? And David said unto Amalek the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now therefore, verse 3, Now therefore, what is under thine hand, give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or what there is present. All right, so David here, he's had to scoot-a-loot pretty quick to save his own hide. All right, so he's left with no provisions. He's got some men with him, and he's hungry, and they're really hungry, all right, because they're running from Saul the king. All right, now David's already been anointed going to be the next king, but they hadn't caught up with Saul yet. All right, so this is that transition that's in the kingship that's going on. All right, but he goes to the priest who's at the temple, and David there's no bread there. And he said, we're going to see what it says. And the priest answered David and said, There's no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread. Now this is the show bread, all right? If the young men have kept themselves at least from women. All right, so this is the priest talking. And they're hungry. Now, the only thing there is showbread. Now, you're supposed to put the showbread in on the table of showbread, and then after so long, the next set of showbread comes in, the old showbread comes out. What the law says is that the priest eat it. That's what they're supposed to do, and that's where the idea of kind of communion comes. The bread that becomes Christ's body comes, and the priest eat it and consume it, and just like we do in communion. Okay? But that's not what's going to happen here, okay? Because this is the only bread there is. And David answered the priest and said unto him, Of a truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days. He can say for sure it's been 3 days because they've been on a run, all right? Since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common. All right? Yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessels. All right? So he's saying, okay, this bread's not exactly holy. It's the one that's coming back off of the table of showbread. All right? All right? So the priest, so he's saying it's not really the holy one. The holy one's the one that really goes in for God. Right? Yeah. And this is what the priest eat, what comes out. And so they just kind of fudge the law a little bit because there's a lot more that goes with eating it. But they're saying, okay, in this situation, see, they're just working the best they can. They're in trouble. They got to get something done. Right? They need some food. Right? In this situation, then it becomes allowed. But it wouldn't be for just anybody. It just happened to be for this situation. He said, all right, since I can verify that these men have at least not been with women for the last few days, that you guys go ahead and eat it. All right? And so the priest, verse 6, and so the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord, and put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. All right, so they'd just taken it out. So there was no violation as far as that goes. Well, there he just gives it. So there it is. Now, I wanted to just kind of bring that up because there's a lot about law that we were talking about, right? Well, here, it's a very good exception to it, and it was because of need above all things. Yeah. David was the next king in line, and he has to survive, so therefore it became lawful then at that point. I just wanted to throw that in there about the table of showbread, because you'll hear a lot of stuff about it. Yeah, that's right. When it comes back out, and it's for the priest, it's what the law says, and that's absolutely so. All right. All right, so let's go back to where we were. Where were we? Exodus 20. What did I say? 25? Sounds familiar. Yeah, contribution to sanctuary. Yeah, table of showbread. There we go. All right. So then back to Exodus chapter 25. And where did we get down to? Set the table of showbread for me? 27. Okay. That's right. So we're on, so we'll go back to 26. And thou shalt make for it 4 rings of gold, and put the rings on the 4 corners that are on the 4 feet thereof. Over against the border shall the rings be for places of the staves to bear the table. And thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with gold, that the table may be borne with them. Thou shalt make the dishes thereof, and the spoons thereof, and the covers thereof, and the bowls thereof, to cover withal of pure gold. Thou shalt make them, and thou shalt set upon the table of showbread before me always. So there's always supposed to be there continually. Now, if you keep checking out showbread, you'll find everything that's in the inner sanctum too. I ran into that when I was checking this out. What was in the Ark of the Covenant, and then what was like the rod of Aaron that was budded and all. There was a lot of stuff that was actually around right there in the inner sanctum. All right. Okay. So that finishes the table of showbread. So we've got the Ark of the Covenant, then the table of showbread, plus all the utensils, most of which we're getting ready to go into the lampstand here. Some of those had to do with lightning and then putting the flame out and things like that. All those were to be made out of gold. Really ornate was a lot of detail and care. What am I looking for? Never mind. They were really pretty. I think that's the best word I'm going to find at this moment. All right, now we're going to move on to the next thing that God tells them to build for this temple. All right, and this temple is going to end up being the temple in the book of Numbers and then the book of Deuteronomy. And we'll go on into the period of the kings for a while before Solomon actually builds the first temple. All right, so it stands from that time between the Exodus till right after the kings are actually begin to be established. All right, so that means that it ran and held all the way through all the books of the judges, because they were how Israel was ruled before the kings was by the judges. All right. Nonetheless, here we go. Verse 31 of chapter 25 of the Exodus. And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold. Of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knobs, and his flowers shall be of the same. So all of it will look the same, each candlestick, right? And 6 branches, so you have one candlestick, right? Mm-hmm. Comes up out of the middle. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it. 3 branches of the candlestick of the one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side. So we have 7 total, with 1 in the middle. 3 bowls make like almonds, with a knob and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls make like almonds in the other branch, with a knob and a bowl and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlesticks, so do it in each one of them. All right. And we're going to get back to this here in a minute, because it's called a menorah. All right. And the candlestick shall be 4 bowls made like unto almonds, with their knobs and their flowers. Verse 35. And there shall be a knob under 2 branches of the same, and a knob under 2 branches of the same, and a knob under 2 branches of the same, which I think I'm stuttering. All right. According to the 6 branches which proceed out of the candlesticks. Their knobs and their branches shall be the same. All shall be one beaten work of pure gold. So really, so you're talking about some real extravagant. That's the word I'm looking for. It was looking for some really extravagant work is being put into this, right? And thou shalt make 7 lamps thereof, and it shall have light the lamps thereof, and that they may give light over against it. So now picture this: these 7 lights, right, illuminate the entire inner sanctum. Right, so this is a big menorah. This is a big set of candlesticks. All right, and the tongues thereof, and the snuff dishes thereof shall be of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold shall he make it, with all the vessels, and look that thou make them after their pattern which was shown thee in the mount. All right, now that's the first thing I want to address right there. It's coming out all in words here, but he keeps referring, he's going to refer to it over and over, all right, back to the pattern that he was shown on the mountain. Now, remember when he went into the smoke and then just appeared on top? He was up with God. I think up there, I always said, they just banged out 10 commandments.
Yeah.
And I mean, there 40 days and 10 commandments, that's all you got going on. I mean, so there was something else that was going on, and I think he was shown this. He had a mock-up, or there was an original that they based it off, and Moses got to examine it.
Yeah.
As a part of that 40 days, because it keeps referring to the pattern that was shown to you on the mount. So it's something that we're not privy to, but something that Moses saw himself. All right. Now, this menorah, well, we've talked about this menorah before, in my little Bible study anyway. I mean, you have, but we didn't really hit it that way. All right. Remember, it was one candlestick with 6 branches making 7. Well, we've talked about 7 candlesticks, right? In the book of Revelation, right? So that's where I want to go, is Revelation chapter 1. All right, now let's go down to, let's see. Let me find out. Let's see. Well, hold on. Son, Churchill. Vision man. Run the campaign tribulation case. Give me just a minute and I will get my head fixed out right here. All right. Let's talk about this. Is okay. Pick it up in verse 10. All right. Now, this verse 10 in the book of Revelation, if you don't nail this verse exactly correct, you're out of whack for the rest of the book of Revelation. Now, I know that is probably going to chap some people's butts pretty good, but suck it up, Buttercup. That's just the way it is, okay? Now, you have to get the perspective right for the book of Revelation, or it doesn't make any sense. And here's where you get it, is in chapter 1, verse 10. It says, let's go back up to verse 9. Let's start there. I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation. All right, so he's speaking about the book of Revelation to the people in the last days. All right, and John, let's just say John had suffered some trouble himself along the way. All right, more so than any of us probably will ever have to. All right, tribulation and in the kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ was in the isle that is called Patmos for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. Right now, he's saying that he was testifying, and because of the testimony that he put forward about Christ being the Messiah and the King of Kings, well, he's ended up now, his butt's locked up on Patmos where he's going to die. All right, so he's put his money where his mouth is. Let's just say that. Verse 10. This is talking John, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. All right, let's get that right first. He's not on earth, he's in the Spirit, and he's not on what most people would call the Lord's Day, but they would want to say Sunday. All right? But the Lord's Day is the first day of the millennium. All right? And that's what the Lord's Day. You have to get that right. That it's not a common Sabbath, but this is the Lord's Day. All right? And he heard behind him a great voice as a trumpet. All right? Saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. What thou seest, write in a book and send it unto the 7 churches. And I held on to that 7 which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, unto Smyrna, and to Pergamos, and to Thyatira, and to Sardis, and to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. All right, and I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. So here, this is a menorah we were talking about in the beginning of the book of Revelation. I wanted to draw this out if for no other reason than to make people understand that the symbols and the things that you get in the beginning of the book are also the symbols and the ideas that you get in the end of the book. All right? There's no such thing as a New Testament. It's just one testament. All right? And it starts in the old and it runs to now. But it's still just one testament. Now that's where we really mess up. Is because we have a divining point where we say, no, this is what's important. And we blow off everything a lot of time. Not everyone. If the shoe don't fit, don't worry about it. It's just water off a duck's back. But suck it up, Buttercup, if it fits. All right? Because you hear it all the time. Well, I've been teaching for 20 years and I've never been outside of the New Testament.
Yeah.
All right, well, sorry, then you don't understand.
Yep.
All right, and if you don't understand the menorah out of the book of Exodus, you don't understand that you're looking at one here in the book of Revelation. All right, but these same people are also afraid of this book. All right, that's one they won't want to touch because it makes you stand in some places. But nonetheless, all right, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one likened the Son of Man, because he is, clothed with a garment down to his feet and girded his paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet were as fine brass, as they burned in a furnace. And his voice was the sound of many waters. Now, this should be something now that we're beginning to remember. This is a comparison that's used over and over and over and over, like Old Testament and New Testament, like we were saying, all right? Now, like I said before, I believe this is probably an example, like with the cherubims, because their description is they look like they're coals of fire as they walk around doing their thing. Well, I believe that this is probably an example of our third age body. I mean, because the cherubims, they'll never be born in flesh, they'll never be corrupted, so they've already inherited their third age body. Christ, of course, would be in his, and the description of him and the cherubim sound the same. And if you don't know what any of that means, well, then you get to work. You're behind and you get caught up because it's all really important stuff. Now, I don't know too much about that third age body. Who knows? That's a pretty vague description, but it still leaves room for lots of wow. You may end up that in the third age, we may gather together and bask in the rays of dying stars to feed. Who knows? I mean, who knows? A lot of people go flip over that statement, but let them. I don't care. I mean, it says there's no end to his kingdom, and the wonders don't. Paul, like I said, Paul, he could have shown it, but he had no idea. He couldn't. I don't know what I'm looking at. Right. He had no idea. So who knows where it leads? And that's just some fun thought, I think. Other people would take some off, and I don't care either. But nonetheless. But this is what I want to say. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. So again, back to coals of fire and things like this. Okay? Now, these 7 stars are in his hands. At the bottom of this chapter, we know what these stars are, and we know what these candlesticks are, right? We know the stars are angels of the 7 churches, and the candlesticks are those churches. All right. Now, so we go all the way back then into the book of Exodus. Think about that. What's supposed to light God's house is 7 lights, 7 candlesticks in the book of Revelation, supposed to shed light to the world upon the magnificence of God. You got the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, all these things that represent God's communion with man. All of them are all right there. Right? And so this was planned from the beginning. This relationship between the menorah and these 7 churches in the end. He sees the beginning from the end. So it was planned into the whole thing according to the pattern that Moses was shown up on the mount when he was there with God. Now, I think those are very interesting things, right? And you can let your mind go where you want with what it actually means. But I do believe that was planned in the whole kit and caboodle for exactly that thing. And then, like in the book of Revelation, these 7 churches are supposed to be the light that shows God's magnificence. But what you find out from these 7 letters that there's only 2 of them that are actually shining bright. And the rest of them have some big flaws going on in them. Okay, so big warning. So that means out of those 7 lights that are supposed to light the inner sanctum, you only got 2 of them that are burning with a flame. So I just put that in their pipe and smoke it and see how it comes out. All right? But nonetheless, that's enough about that. So let's go back then, one more time, back to the book of Exodus. And where we are in chapter 25, way down at the bottom. Man, so we did all that stuff. Oh, we finished all that, didn't we? And the pattern after. All right. Now, I think we're probably going to stop there because we pick it up with the tabernacle after this. All right, and that gets into cherubims. And to be honest, I just want another week to work on the cherubims lecture because I don't know if we might roll it over into a BV. I don't know. We'll see. But that's where you get your first introduction really to who the cherubims are. Comes here, and we're going to, as they draw the picture in your mind of how the ark or how the tabernacle is actually set up. So being all that made so, we're just a little bit short tonight, only about 25 minutes. But it's like I said, I like to break these in certain spots. It makes it easier.
Yeah.
And some of this is kind of dry because it repeats itself over and over and over and over and over. But still, we'll do it credit and see what happens once we go through it and draw certain things out. Anyway, Sunday we'll be back up here. We'll be back in Genesis with Abraham and his actual first son. So Ishmael. So we'll talk about that when we get there. You guys have a good night.